Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's videos is all about career in software development and the tech stacks people use. Recently I've got so many queries where people are asking which tech stacks are available, or as a software development, which tech stacks they can use. The first tech stack we are going to talk about is one of the tech stacks that I have used in my lifetime. Primarily, I've been a Microsoft developer throughout my lifetime. Started off with Visual Basic way back in 1987, and then .NET that started off in early 2000, and .NET framework which came and then primarily changed to .NET Core, and now it's again like they are amalgamating every .NET into a single .NET. So this is one of these stacks which people can follow. Normally on the back end you have a SQL Server and ASP.NET Core, and primarily the language used for this is C#. And on the front end, of course, you can use React or Angular or Vue.js. We can also use a server-side scripting with Razor Pages in case we are not going to use a front-end language. So you can use a server-side scripting with Razor Pages also. Moreover, because today's world is moving on to the cloud, so Microsoft Azure definitely coincides with this stack very easily. And as a developer, you might be asked to work upon web app services, or Azure Functions, or Azure SQL, Key Vault, Azure Logic Apps, or Azure Storage. So this is a kind of a complete, I would say, a full stack option for any person who is working on the Microsoft developer stack. They just need to master the back end, front end, and they would also need to now know about the cloud environment. Before, let's say 5 years back, people were not really being asked if they knew about cloud development or not, but nowadays companies are asking about the cloud development experience, and it is being taken as a part of your overall skill set. So if you are going to work as a software developer and you want to work in the Microsoft developer stack, this is the skill set that primarily you will be needing it. This is the second tech stack which people can really adopt if you really want to be a software developer, and primarily it is focused upon the open source technologies. Today's world is dominated by JavaScript, so primarily if you go for the backend, you will find Node.js as one of the major options to work as a backend developer. Of course, there is also an option of working with the Rails environment as a backend developer. But yes, a majority of the websites or people are now moving towards Node.js. That's what the trend I've seen. JavaScript is the language that's being used out, whether it's Node.js or on the client side or on the server side, wherever you want to work with. The front end, definitely they have been developed using JavaScript, whether it's React, Angular, or Vue.js. And the server-side scripting option is also available over here. If you're working with Node.js, you can use the Express engine that can be used to render the server-side scripts. Because the open source stack also is nowadays moving on towards the cloud. So majority of the cloud providers, whether it is AWS or Google Cloud, those are very much aligned with the open source stack. Though nowadays even Microsoft Azure or AWS or GCP, they are providing cross-cutting technologies, whether AWS is providing a Windows machine or Azure is providing a Linux machine. So we can use anything, but primarily if you're working on an open source stack, this is the natural choice which companies or people would have it. So if you talk about the GCP, so you just need to have like some foundational knowledge of cloud functions, Cloud SQL, Firestore, Google APG API, and in AWS you might be asked to work upon AWS Lambda, AWS Elastic Beanstalk, Aurora, which is an RDS service, AWS API, EC2 instances, or even the simple storage service. because these are normally being governed with the help of Node.js or JavaScript as the languages behind that. So this is one of the second stacks which you can use if we are not going in for a Microsoft technologies. The next one which we are going to talk about is not actually, I would say, a tech stack, rather a kind of a technology or a pattern that's being developed and now being adopted by different companies. You might have heard about Dockers and containers and microservices. This is purely a microservices based pattern where individual project is divided into very small loosely coupled services, and rather than developing a monolithic project that was developed way back, but now people are moving on to smaller independent loosely coupled microservices pattern. These are normally governed by technologies called as Docker or Docker Swarm or Rancher or OpenShift or Kubernetes. You have a Docker Hub like a container registry, which is a publicly available, and you can go in for a private registry also if you go for a paid registration or get an enterprise license for that. You can develop those microservices pattern-based applications by using backend on ASP.NET Core. It has a full support for Docker and other containers and container services. You can use Node.js, you can use JavaScript. On the front end, you can use React, Angular, Vue, or server-side scripting like Express Engine, or even with the ASP.NET Core Razor Pages, you can use that. And primarily the Docker and containers, they are fully supported as a managed services on a cloud environment, whether it is AWS, GCP, or Azure. If you go in for Azure, it has an Azure Kubernetes service. The AWS has a Elastic Kubernetes service, and Google has a Google Kubernetes engine. These are primarily managed services, and they can be easily deployed, scaled, and you can deploy your containers, pods, and everything. And they are all built in as a part of the cloud environment. And we can also use the CI/CD pipelines to automate these pods deployment or service deployments onto these environments. For the container registries, Azure does provide you a Azure Container Registry. AWS provides us Elastic Container Registry, and Google Cloud also provides a container registry, which is more likely a private container registries, because you can then use these private registries to actually deploy it onto the Kubernetes managed services or even the container instances which the cloud services do provide. So this is not a kind of a skill set or I would say a tech stack which people are like you can use except for the 1 and 2 which we have talked about, like the Microsoft and the open source, but rather it's more likely kind of a pattern of technologies that's being used for development of microservices or anything. So you can use Microsoft based tech stack or even open source tech stack to use for this Dockers and containers. Before we end this video, there is one more thing which I want to talk about and that's like the securing and which comes with authorization and authentication. Now, whenever we develop the applications, this is one of the major concepts normally people don't really pay much attention to. We develop our applications, they might be very good in working and everything, but sometimes they lack in the security aspects. So every application, whether we develop using any stack or you develop it in the form of a microservices based, it needs to have a proper security implementation. We can do those security implementations as a managed services with the auth providers like Auth0 or Okta. These are primarily the auth providers, or they provide the managed services to manage those authorizations. When I say authorization, so it means we are just like kind of maintaining whether we are really authorized to use this application or not. It is not doing an authentication for us. So that's normally a major misconception people have. And one of the misconceptions with a lot of people is Auth0 versus Auth2. Now, if we talk about Auth2 is actually a security protocol, and Auth0 is actually a security service provider, like a managed service provider. So if we talk about the authentication, OpenID Connect can be used for authentication, where we actually define our credentials with a username and a password. So that's more likely an authentication that can be defined. And these OpenID Connect can be used with identity providers like Microsoft, Google, Twitter, or any other known provider which we can use, or federated identity providers that we can use. So as a developer, whether you go in for a Microsoft development tech stack or an open source tech stack, or you are working with let's say containers and dockers and any other thing, securing your application is one of the major concepts you must know as a part of the software development career track. Normally it is not given much of the importance, but nowadays, as there are so many incidents of hacking and people are manipulating those applications, or data is misused or anything, so now companies have started putting more effort in securing their applications. So yes, this was a small video where we talked about the different tech stacks that we can use, whether it is Microsoft, open source, we work for Dockers or containers, and even securing our applications. So I hope you guys have liked this video. For any questions, consultancy and training, these are my email addresses. Shoot me a mail if you have any questions or anything. Whenever I get some time, I'll definitely try to answer your queries. Have a nice one, guys. Hope to see you all in the next video. Thank you.